Last fall, Sansara and I had the extraordinary opportunity to interview Bob Avakian on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. These interviews are available on our YouTube channel at YouTube/the Revcoms. As an article that's on our website, revcom.us, observed, quote, "What is concentrated in these interviews is objectively a game changer. There is simply no one and nothing else like this, and any decent, honest, intellectually curious person who cares about the state of the world and watches these will be transformed," end quote. Bob Avakian BA goes at so many different urgent questions, unrehearsed, with science, passion, and a whole lot of clarity. He wields science, applying the scientific method and the approach of the new communism to solving the excruciatingly and seemingly unsolvable problems that are confronting humanity. He breaks down and brings alive the problem that we face in the system we live under. That's at the root of all that we face, from the danger of nuclear war.
All this ridiculous stuff, people sticking their heads down, or, I stay in my own lane. You think if there's a nuclear war, it won't touch your lane?
To what this system does to black and brown youth.
The mass shooting of black people, Latinos, and Native Americans by police is way bigger than any individual. You have to think in big terms about how are we going to deal with these big problems that are way bigger than any individual.
The scope of these talks is nothing less than the whole world. Bob Avakian goes at these questions like nobody else. He speaks to and challenges the youth brought up in the vicious world who learn to mimic the big-time gangsters who run this country with tragic and heartbreaking consequences.
There's this whole notion that, if you aren't fucking over somebody else, you're weak. The choices are not being the fucker or being fucked over. The choices are being enslaved or emancipated.
He speaks of the import of beauty in the natural world and in art. Why to appreciate Shakespeare as well as art and literature from around the world?
The kind of world we're aiming for is not one where that kind of beauty is discounted or, suppressed, but one where the human being's need for that is given much fuller expression.
This comes alive in funny childhood and high school memories with deep lessons for today.
I consider one of the great things about Berkeley was that it only has one public high school. And so when you go to that public high school, you're thrown together with everybody.
He doesn't shirk from the harsh reality that is bearing down on us, with the future hanging in the balance as the system of capitalism imperialism takes us to the edge of nuclear annihilation and climate catastrophe. He breaks down the workings of the system so vividly and clearly that at one and the same time, someone without much education can understand it, and someone with a whole lot of schooling is compelled to confront the actual reality that is the system at the root of what we face today. Most of all, the interviews bring that we don't have to put up with any of this. A radically different and far better world through a real revolution to overthrow this system is possible. Speaking particularly of the heightened danger of nuclear war, BA says, quote, "We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to rule over us. They need to be overthrown as soon as possible," end quote. By the time you get to the end of these three interviews, you feel this possibility, even if you never considered it before. This last weekend, we had a chance to talk with some people about these interviews, and a young person who watched the interviews and is now working with one of the Revolution Clubs minced no words when she said that the BA interviews are an intervention in this rare time when the future hangs in the balance, a moment when revolution could be possible. The interviews, she said, is why I'm here. Well, let me be equally direct. When we make the case on this show that the roadmap for this moment is one of either a truly terrible future, even existential, or something truly emancipating, the latter future, the future where we could get beyond all the degradation, exploitation, oppression, war, destruction, requires a real revolution. And this revolution requires you and millions more to get into it. And the invitation, the introduction, the feeling and the substance of the future that is possible, the society, the world that really could be, all that is what BA brings in these interviews. And for this reason, there's a need for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands to watch these interviews now. For this to happen requires sharp and persistent struggle against all the ways of thinking that hold people back. What BA does in the interviews, what we do on this show, is take off the blinders. We expose the reality behind the facade, strip away the mirror of the me that is embedded in the phone. Take what BA brings. Take what we bring in this show and be a part of shaking and waking people up. Provoke them, challenge them, inspire them to see how they are thinking about things is not how things actually are. America's not the good guys. When the police murder our youth over and over again, they are just doing their job. They are not there to serve and protect anything but the system. Thinking that you have your own reality is absolutely ridiculous. Reality is reality for everyone. There is no savior from heaven or the Democratic Party coming to save you. We face a system. It hasn't been forever, and it need not be forever. Watch these interviews with Bob Avakian. Feel it and come to know what really could be. We have said that these interviews are full of heart and soul and hardcore for revolution. And over the last several weeks on the RNL show, we have shown parts of the interviews on war, on abortion, on the youth, on the liberation of women and the emancipation of humanity. Today, we want to show you the heart and soul of BA and what that says about the kind of revolution he is leading, the kind of movement that we are building, the kind of people that all of us strive to be today and really could be in a radically new society. Well, you've already taken us to what we wanted to end the first interview with you on the show, and by singing, I think, at least 3 times on this show, which has been great, because what we wanted to do is in 2003, you gave a talk that we call the Revolution Talk, and I don't know, hours into it, all of a sudden you burst into song, a Ry Cooder song, Across the Borderline.
Now my voice is hoarse, but I'm going to give this a try. There's a land, so I've been told.
And then later on, a decade later, I guess the band Outer National took that and put it into a song that we've played many times on the show.
There's a land, so I've been told. Every street is paved with gold, and it's just across the borderline.
And then you've also spoken, see, you've taken a lot of things out from what we said. I just want to make sure everybody sees this. We were just talking before about these are 45 records.
Yeah.
Okay, this is vinyl's not coming back in this form. But look, this is your memoir, From Ike to Mao and Beyond, My Journey from Mainstream America to Revolutionary Communist. But there you are with the record. So, and you just spoke about the influence of the culture, black culture. But we wanted to ask you about this, because you've written and talked about how if you don't have a poetic spirit, or at least a poetic side, it's very dangerous for you to lead a Marxist movement or be the leader of a socialist state. This question of the poetic side, and you've written about, including to people of our, who've not had a formal education, the importance of Shakespeare and how you can understand that. You've spoken some already tonight about the influence of black music on you, but poetry, literature, these are things that have had a big influence on you. So we wanted to ask you 2 things. One, how did this shape you, who you are? And then more, why does it matter to have a poetic spirit to lead a revolution?
Well, you see, you held up that memoir cover, and you see that tells you what at the time I thought looked cool. So, so you can draw your own conclusions about that. What does it reflect about the times and perhaps about me at the time too? But
well, you missed a whole discussion here last night about the Beach Boys, and then what happened in the move to black culture and all the developments. But
well, I'm sorry I missed it. Sounds good. Yeah. Sounds interesting. But to get to your question, look, I think human beings need. This is a point that's been made, but it's important to keep coming back to this. Human beings need to be amazed. That's part of what it means to be human. You know, you get amazed when you see an amazing painting or a cultural performance or something someone does in athletics. You know, and you get a certain joy from being amazed at something, especially in a positive way. And this is one element of it. But more generally, human beings have a need for beauty. And beauty comes in many different forms. It comes in nature. And yes, different people do find different things beautiful, but still there's a need for beauty. It comes in nature, it comes in music, it comes in poetry, it comes in literature generally. You know, it comes in many different forms. You know, a sunset and so on and so forth. If the kind of world we're aiming for is not one where that kind of beauty is discounted or, suppressed, but one where the human being's need for that is given much fuller expression. And a lot of that is suppressed in people. You know, life is so hard for so many people, and things are so bitter that they don't, and they're scuffling so hard they don't even have the chance to enjoy much beauty, though they do find ways even so. So, the kind of world we're aiming for is a world where the human ability to, appreciate beauty in many different forms would be given much fuller expression. And that links up with the question. There's also beauty in the intellectual realm. Look at this, telescope and what it's showing us about the universe. There's beauty in that. There's wonder in that. Isn't that important for human beings to have a full life? The same when you're trying to solve a problem, not just a political problem, but trying to understand a phenomenon in nature, and then you finally do understand it. It's a very exhilarating experience. The same is true in literature, like you mentioned Shakespeare. Well, a lot of Shakespeare language is archaic. It means it's outdated. It means language that people all would have understood generally at the time, but not all of it, not even most of it. But some of it is language that we no longer use. Most people don't go around saying forsooth and so on and so forth, and there are other expressions that are even, more abstract to people, or, unfamiliar to people now. But there's a lot of beauty in the language of Shakespeare. And let's be clear. There are a lot of dead people who are not white who have also created a lot of beauty in the world, and too much of that has been suppressed. But there are also dead white men who have created a lot of beauty, and we should not be prevented from enjoying that as well. And Shakespeare is one of them. The language is beautiful. As I said in my memoir, I enjoy puns. There are all kinds of puns in Shakespeare. Some of them are better than others. But there are all kinds of humor. There's even malapropisms, which means misusing or a word, saying a word wrong, or I remember one. I think it's in Macbeth, the play Macbeth, which by the way was a favorite of Huey Newton. He used to quote Act 5, Scene 5, Macbeth. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its petty pace from day to day, etc. But earlier in there's a scene where there's this drunken gatekeeper at one of the castles, and he opens the gate and he starts rambling on, and at one point he says, makes a comparison. He says, but comparisons are odorous. Now it's actually supposed to be comparisons are odious. Odious means hateful. But he's drunk and he does a malapropism. He says, but after all, comparisons are odorous. Means they stink, So, even things like that are, I get a kick out of it. It's funny. It's a good use of a malapropism. It's a good use of language, and distorting language for the purpose of humor. And different people like different poets, modern poetry from the Romantic period. I happen to like Keats as I was growing up. I found the language very evocative. It made me think about a lot of things, and it also just it created a certain feeling beyond just what it made me think about. Created a certain feeling, bright star, were I as steadfast as thou art. Just looking at a star and saying, okay, this star is seems to have a lot of constancy. It's there all the time. Would that I could be as firm as that. Things like that make you think, make you feel. If you don't have an appreciation for that, then when you turn to politics, you're going to tend to be very dogmatic. And you're going to be very dry, and nobody's going to live in any kind of world that you have anything to do with setting the terms of. At least I certainly wouldn't. And I don't think most people would. So this is what I mean when I say, you don't have to write poetry. That's not my point. But, you have to have an appreciation for beauty in all these different kinds of ways, or else you're not aiming for the kind of society that we need to be aiming for, where human beings can really thrive in the fullest way and in the fullest dimension.